Welcome to another episode of Too Close to Home, the series where we dig up creepy stories, haunted places and mysteries from our very own patrons' hometowns. This episode we're looking at Shaundra, Sefarina, Bret, Nicole and Louise. And we have some good stories in store for you five. If you want us to dig up stories from your area, head on over to Patreon and join our Too Close to Home tier. Thank you everyone supporting, and now, as always, hit those lights, sit back, and enjoy. Shaundra Jenkins, Logan County, Ohio. Logan County is the place our patron Shaundra has asked us to look at, and we were spoiled for choice about what to write about, as there have been some pretty high-profile murder cases in the area over the past few years. But we thought we would look first at a family massacre, and secondly at a haunting tale from many years ago. It all began on Sunday, May 29, 2005, when 18-year-old Scott Moody, from Bellefontaine, Logan County, Ohio, was due to graduate high school. But instead of a happy graduation day, Scott massacred his entire family. First he shot his grandparents, Cheryl and Gary Schaefer, in their farmhouse, and then returned to his home, reloaded his gun, and went from bedroom to bedroom shooting relatives and friends while they slept. After killing his family, Scott turned the gun on himself and fired twice into his head. The first shot from above and behind his left ear lodged in his sinus. The second went through the right side of his mouth and was fatal. Scott killed his mother and two of his sister's friends, 19-year-old Megan Karras and 14-year-old Paige Harshbarger. His 15-year-old sister Stacy was the only survivor. But the question was, why did he do it? While it seems the family had a tough few years, the dairy farm they ran was failing, and Sherry had divorced Scott, and Stacy's father and her grandmother, Wilma, had passed away. Sherry had tried to rescue the crumbling family business, but her parents resisted her suggestions to change things up and modernize. And at the time of the shooting, debts were mounting, and there was also some dispute about Wilma's will. It was also revealed that in the 2 years before the killings, police had visited the main farmhouse 10 times in response to noise complaints, although no charges were brought. However, no one could believe Scott was capable of killing his family. Even his school teachers were stunned. Although in the weeks leading up to the shooting, it was reported that Sherry had contacted a counsellor for advice about how to get an abusive son, now legally an adult, to move out of her house. The only survivor, Stacy, also refused to believe her brother was the shooter. She described being woken up to a gun in her face, and as she rolled over, she was shot in the neck. Stacy described the assailant as a man with grey hair, not her brother. Despite being injured, Stacy staggered to her mother's room, but instead of calling the police, she called two friends and then her stepsister, who drove over to the home and discovered the other victims whilst on the phone to 911. The police response was swift as the Logan County Sheriff's Office neighboured the Schaefer farm, and Stacy was interviewed at length by Deputy Sheriff John Stout, and she was adamant that Scott was not the killer. But in the aftermath of the shooting, it seems Deputy Sheriff Stout got a little too close to Stacy. Her stepmother overheard the pair making plans to spend the weekend together. She later reported him, and the deputy was fired and indicted on multiple felonies, although sexual battery charges were dismissed. Stout has always maintained that he befriended Stacy only because he thought she knew much more about the shooting than she let on. Over 15 years later, there are still lingering doubts about what really happened that day. It is possible, but very rare, for someone to shoot themselves twice in their head. What is also unusual is shooting yourself from behind and above the left ear. It's also curious that Scott's injuries were consistent with the gunshot wounds of all the other victims. Another question is that if Deputy Stout's relationship with Stacy predated the murders, him being at the crime scene and interviewing Stacy would have compromised the investigation beyond repair. It may also be the reason Stacy did not call 911 immediately after the murders. A worthy note to point out is that Stacy's mother was an only child, so after her death, Stacy was the main beneficiary of not only the farm, estimated at the time to be worth approximately $1 million, but also of her great-grandmother Wilma's estate. Of course, this could all be circumstantial, and in the intervening years, Stacy has tried to move on with her life and is now married with a child. She has talked to the murderers and the grey-haired man. However, authorities have made no attempt to discover his identity, believing that Scott was responsible for the tragic murder-suicide. It seems there could be an undiscovered mystery in this case that could exonerate Scott Moody from being blamed for annihilating his family. The Hatchet Man of Logan County. In the 1830s, Andrew Alleman lived on what is now MacArthur Township Road 56 with his wife and 3 children. Alleman was very abusive to his wife and children and had developed a hatred towards them. He even disowned one of his 2 sons, wrongly believing he wasn't his. After the family fell ill with scarlet fever, instead of looking after them, Alleman started poisoning them. He successfully managed to kill 2 of his children, but his wife and 1 of his sons survived. Desperate to be rid of his wife, Alleman later murdered her with a hatchet. The crimes were the first reported murders in Logan County's history, and Alleman was soon arrested. However, he managed to escape from the jail in Bellefontaine and fled to Baltimore, Maryland, where he assumed the name Adam Horn. He remarried, but eventually murdered his second wife too. Alleman was later tried and convicted of the murder and hanged in Baltimore in 1844. However, it's said that in death he returned to haunt the road that he once lived on in Logan County, near to where his murdered family are buried. In the cemetery where his wife Louisa and son John are buried, there is also a headstone with the name Andrew Alleman on, although contrary to popular belief, it is not believed to be the Hatchet Man, as he was buried in Maryland. But if you are unlucky enough to encounter the spirit of the Hatchet Man as you drive along the road, you may be in for a fright, particularly if you are a woman, because as in death, as in life, the Hatchet Man thoroughly dislikes females. Sefarina Tabor, Phoenix, Arizona. Sefarina lives in Phoenix, Arizona, a place with its fair share of mysteries and haunted locations. It also has no less than 4 castles. Here we will look at 2 of those castles, as well as a haunted hotel. We hope you enjoy Sefarina. Tabor Castle. Tabor Castle sits on a hill overlooking Phoenix. Its unusual wedding cake design is easily visible from the highway and those flying into Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport. The castle was built between 1928 and 1930 by Alessio Carraro, an Italian immigrant whose vision was a desert resort community with a hotel surrounded by a cactus garden. However, even though the design materialized, the community did not. And Alessio later sold the property to cattle baron E.A. Tovaria and his wife Della. Today, the castle and grounds are owned and maintained by the city of Phoenix, but there has always been an air of mystery about the place, and there are plenty of rumors of hauntings and other stories. One of the tales is that Della was murdered in the house after a break-in and has haunted the castle ever since. Though after we did a bit of research, we discovered only part of the story is true. There was a break-in and Della was tied up, but she did manage to escape unharmed. A shot was fired during the struggle, and there is still a bullet hole in the ceiling of the kitchen area. It is said that the robbers ransacked the place in search of a safe they believed held valuables and money. The truth is, there was a safe in the basement, but it contained no treasures. It was part of the many items the Tovaria family acquired from a bank that was being remodeled in downtown Phoenix, some of which they used as storage cabinets and ornaments. Della died a few months after the break-in at the age of 81 on January 17, 1969. She died from pneumonia and not a beating. It is believed, however, that she does haunt the castle, and many who have visited the building have experienced paranormal activity. It is said that at midnight on the anniversary of Della's death, a woman in white has been seen waving in distress, sometimes even wailing. But if anyone approaches her or sets foot inside the home, she flees into a rage. Another half-truth about the castle is that there is a secret tunnel in the basement that gangsters use to escape the law. There is indeed a secret tunnel in the basement, but it does not lead anywhere. It just has a nice view of the city. So despite popular belief, there were no gangsters hiding out in the castle. Mystery Castle. Another one-of-a-kind castle in Phoenix is Mystery Castle at 80E, Mineral Road at the base of South Mountain Park. Boyce Luther Gully built the castle over a 15-year period with rescued materials, such as clinker bricks, telegraph poles, rail tracks, automobile parts and wagon wheels. The castle included 13 fireplaces, an underground bar and chapel, pivoting glass doors, a cantilevered stairway, and decorative turrets. The story goes that Gully had left his wife and daughter, Mary Lou, in Seattle when he learned he had tuberculosis. Mary Lou had always wanted a sand castle that wouldn't wash away with the tide, so he built the castle for her, and upon his death she lived there until her own passing. While she lived there, she gave tours of the castle and shared the story about her father. The building is reported to be haunted by the ghost of a little girl that has been seen wandering throughout. Some claim this to be Mary Lou Gully, although this is disputed because she did not die in childhood. In fact, she only knew of the existence of the castle after her father's death from tuberculosis. Those that have witnessed the ghostly child claim she can be heard asking where her daddy is, and occasionally witnesses feel a small invisible hand attempting to hold their own, or a tug at their clothing. Also reported are the sounds of a deep, racked cough, leading some to surmise that Boyce Gully also lingers in his creation after death. Hotel San Carlo. Hotel San Carlo in downtown Phoenix was built in 1928, and at the height of its popularity welcomed the lights of Clark Gable, Carol Lombard, Mae West, and Marilyn Monroe. But despite its famous guest list, it is better known for a tragic event that happened shortly after it opened. In May 1928, a young woman named Leon Jensen checked into room 720. It was reported that she was distressed about a possible breakup with one of the hotel's bellboys, although this has never been conclusively proven. However, whatever the reason, the 22-year-old could no longer face life, and she jumped from the top of the 7-story hotel to her death, landing on the street below. Since her death, a number of guests at the hotel have reported seeing a woman in white standing at the foot of their beds, lingering for a few seconds before walking toward the door and vanishing. It's no coincidence that many of these sightings have occurred in room 720. The mysterious woman in white neither speaks or appears threatening during her reported visits at the hotel. But she is not the only ghost to haunt the hotel. The spirit of a little girl sitting crying has also been witnessed in some of the rooms, and some have also heard the voices of children running through the hallways or laughing in the building's basement area. Paranormal experts have linked the sighting of these spirit children to the Native American worshipping grounds on which Hotel San Carlo was built, and where early Phoenix settlers erected the city's first school in 1874 that eventually was shuttered in 1916 to make way for the luxury hotel. We'd love to know if you've ever been here, Sefarina, and experienced anything paranormal. Bret Alleman. Bret Alleman's hometown is Eastlake, Ohio. He has asked us to look at either Eastlake or his city, Cleveland, so for you, Bret, we have found both. First, the story of a man who lived for many years in Eastlake under a stolen identity, and secondly, a home in Cleveland that is believed to be cursed. Sit back and enjoy. The mystery of the stolen identity. In August 2002, Joseph Newton Chandler III committed suicide, but when police tried to inform his family, they realized that in 1978 he had stolen the name of an 8-year-old Texas boy who was killed along with his parents in a 1945 car accident. The man took the boy's name by using a copy of his birth certificate to gain a social security card from an office in South Dakota. Because the boy never received a social security card, commonly issued only to adults then, the imposter was able to easily assume the identity of the boy who had no surviving close relatives. After his death, authorities tried desperately to find out who he really was, so they could trace relatives who were entitled to the $80,000 in assets he left. However, despite appearances and numerous leads that led to nothing, they thought his true identity would remain a mystery. The case led to the speculation that the man was Jim Morrison, who many believe didn't die in 1971. or even D.P. Cooper, the infamous hijacker last seen in 1971. A breakthrough came in late 2016 when it was announced that forensic genealogist Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick had compared the then unidentified man's YSTR profile to public genetic genealogy YSTR databases to determine his possible last name was Nicholas, and in March 2018 the DNA Doe Project identified the man as Robert Ivan Nichols. Robert Nichols was born in September 12, 1926 in New Albany, Indiana. He joined the US Navy in World War II and served as a firefighter on the USS Aaron Ward, which was bombed by the Japanese in 1945 off Okinawa. He was wounded and awarded the Purple Heart, but it is said he burned his uniforms after the war. In 1947 he married Laverine Court and they had 3 sons. But in 1964, Nicholas left his wife and sons and filed for divorce the same year. He moved to Dearborn, Michigan, when in March 1965 he told his parents that he had moved to Richmond, California. He also sent a letter to his son Phil around the same time. This was the last the family heard of him, and he was reported missing in 1965. They even hired private detectives to try and find him, but to no avail. Nicholas lived the rest of his life in Eastlake, Ohio, where he worked various jobs. His colleagues described him as being a hermit who left his home only to go to work and eat. He also took part in behavior perceived as eccentric and unusual, such as listening to white noise for hours, and once drove 700 miles to a Al Bean store in Maine, only to promptly turn around and drive back to Ohio after discovering there were no parking spaces. Also, according to investigators, his broken computer had made searches of Nazism and plastic explosives. What this case has highlighted is, it seems if you want to disappear from friends and family you can, and in the case of Robert Nichols, that is what he did for over 35 years. Franklin Castle. Franklin Castle isn't really a castle, it's a grand house located on the west side of Cleveland, Ohio. It was built in 1881 to 1883 for Hans Tiedemann, a prosperous German immigrant. After he moved in with his wife, mother and his children, the family seemed to suffer one tragedy after another. First to succumb was his 15-year-old daughter, who died of diabetes. Shortly after, his elderly mother died, and over the next 3 years, the Tiedemans would bury 3 more children, giving rise to speculation that there was more to the deaths than met the eye. To distract his wife, Louise, from her grief, Tiedemann began extensive construction on the home, adding a ballroom, turrets, and gargoyles, giving the house an even more pronounced castle appearance. Not long after, Louise Tiedemann died from a liver disease on March 24, 1895, at the age of just 57. The following year, Haynes sold the house to the Mulhauser family, and by 1908, he and the entire Tiedemann family were dead, leaving no one to inherit his considerable personal wealth. After his death, rumours of crimes committed in the house by him, including sexual indiscretions and murder, started to surface and have contributed to Franklin Castle's reputation as a haunted house, and he was also suspected of hanging his own mentally ill niece in the house and of killing his mistress, a servant girl named Rachel. Over the years that followed, the house functioned as a home to various German and cultural organizations, prompting speculation that the house was chosen for its many secret passageways, where Nazis used it for medical experimentation and spy activities. In January 1968, James Romano, his wife, and 6 children settled in the home, but they found it hard to settle after a series of paranormal encounters. They even attempted exorcisms, and had called in a ghost hunting team to try and rid the place of spirits. After the Romanos moved out, countless families moved in and quickly moved out of the building, all claiming the place was haunted by a little girl on the 3rd floor, a woman in black on the top floor, and a ghostly figure in white on the stairway. They were also plagued by power outages and strange noises. At one point it was reported that human bones were found in a closet believed to belong to a baby, although it later transpired they had been planted by the owner in an attempt to gain publicity for his haunted tours. In early 1984, Michael DeVinco, Judy Garland's fifth and last husband, purchased the house and spent thousands of dollars renovating it after a fire had badly damaged it, although after 10 years it was again up for sale. In 2011, yet another fire damaged parts of the building. Today the house is privately owned, but it's still one of Cleveland's most popular attractions for photo opportunities and ghostly tales. It seems Franklin Castle has it all. It's creepy, haunted, and seemingly cursed. Have you ever been, Bret? And if so, we'd love to hear what it was like. Nicole Raines. Nicole Raines lives in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and what a curious and beautiful place it is. Located along the Tennessee River, this picturesque city has more than a few dark tales and mysteries. So from a shocking multiple murder to an underground city lost to time, this one is for you, Nicole. The Signal Mountain Murders. In July 1988, the deaths of 3 local men shocked the Chattanooga community. On July 9, 1988, 49-year-old Richard Mason, his 22-year-old son-in-law Kenneth Griffith, and his friend 23-year-old Sergeant Earl Smock set out on their quad bikes for a ride around Signal Mountain. But when none of them had returned by the following morning, the alarm was raised. The same day, a local resident stopped to check his tyres on Roberts Camp Road when he noticed 3 quad bikes covered with blood near a trash dump. Police soon arrived and connected the vehicles to the 3 men. As they retrieved the bikes, a man approached them and said that he had heard gunshots the night before. Police searched the area from where the shots were heard and found quad bike tyre tracks on the ground. A short distance away, they discovered a speck of blood on a fallen branch and what looked like drag marks in the mud. Further searches found more blood, brain tissue, and bone fragments, along with a penknife belonging to Kenneth. However, strangely, despite extensive searches, they found no bodies. Then 2 days later, and 11 miles away, 3 bodies were discovered at a dump site. They were identified as the 3 missing men. Each had been killed by a gunshot wound. Investigators quickly tried to piece together the events that led to their deaths and believed the men were confronted by their killer near the place where the blood and drag marks were found. It was theorized that the killer tried to cover up the crime scene, either alone or with the help of an accomplice. First he dumped the bikes, then returned to the scene and moved the bodies. They believed the killer wanted the bodies to be found first, so that the crime scene would never be discovered. But in the aftermath of the deaths, few witnesses came forward. The case later appeared on the Unsolved Mysteries TV series. For nearly 10 years, the murders went unsolved, until in April 1997, when 50-year-old Frank Castile, owner of the land where the murders took place, was arrested and charged with the crime. Following a tip-off, it was discovered that a local woman named Mary Hill was having an affair with Castile, and she had received anonymous letters from his wife saying that he was responsible for the murders. After being interviewed by the police, Hill agreed to have her house bugged in an attempt to get a confession from Castile. However, during their meeting, Castile's wife turned up and confronted them both, and the confession attempt was thwarted. Although soon after, a shotgun owned by Castile was seized, and it was the same type of weapon that was used to kill the men. At the trial, many witnesses came forward testifying they too had been threatened with a shotgun after Castile found them on his property, and Castile had kept a logbook of these encounters. In May 1998, Castile was convicted of the murders and sentenced to life in prison, but he was later given a second trial after it was determined that some of the evidence should not have been admitted. However, at the second trial in 2003, he was again convicted, despite him and his family maintaining his innocence. On May 25, 2019, Castile died in prison, aged 71. What is strange about this case is why it took 10 years to convict a man who was an obvious suspect. Those 10 years must have been torture for the family of the men who were murdered, and those who initially withheld information are partly responsible for that. The underground city in Chattanooga. Chattanooga is a curious place that in the 19th and early 20th centuries experienced extreme flooding. The flooding caused frequent damage to local businesses and had a devastating effect on daily life. After years of being ravaged by the floodwater, causing burst rivers, bridge destruction, homelessness, and significant loss of life, the city's leaders planned to take drastic action. They suggested raising the level of the city streets by between 3 and 5 feet so that it would no longer flood. The people of Chattanooga used soil and a variety of other materials such as foundry waste and sawmill scraps to complete the task. Then in 1933, the construction of the Chickamauga Dam helped regulate the Tennessee River's water levels, preventing any further flooding. Because there are no historical records of the raising of Chattanooga, many believed it was a legend passed down through the generations. However, in 1970, archaeologists and University of Tennessee Chattanooga professor Jeff Brown started noticing small clues to the underground world beneath the streets of Chattanooga whilst walking around the city. He learned from service workers of doorways leading to tunnels and rooms, and some that led to nowhere. He discovered entire basements of buildings that were once first floors, including some with obvious storefronts and windows, all sitting below the original buildings. None of these areas were marked on maps, and very little documentation exists about the buildings, that in some places had been backfilled by as much as 20 foot. Some have explained these underground rooms as basements that were commonplace in downtown Chattanooga in the 19th century, and that they had windows to provide light and ventilation, and there is no evidence that the streets were raised. However, after one man had a terrifying experience working in a basement with a door that leads to one of the underground tunnels, people started to wonder if there was some truth in the claim. The man, who was working alone one night, claims he was confronted by a man wearing old work clothes who looked like he was in pain, but as he tried to make eye contact with the man, the figure turned around and walked right through the doorway, which leads to the underground city. Did he witness a ghost from the past, residing in the mysterious labyrinth below the streets of Chattanooga? It is possible, although it's unlikely we will ever find out, as the entrances to this underground mystery is as far as you can go these days due to the increasing danger of cave-ins. Luis Ortis, El Paso, Texas. Luis has asked us to look at El Paso, Texas, where we are a little spoiled for choice about what to feature for Luis, but we settled on a 60-year-old unsolved disappearance and a haunted school, and we hope you enjoy. The Patterson Mystery. One of the enduring mysteries in El Paso, Texas is the disappearance of William and Margaret Patterson. On the evening of March 5th, 1957, the couple left their home at 3000 Piedmont Drive and completely vanished. Their disappearance was so abrupt that theories ranging from alien abduction to espionage have been suggested. Let's look at the events that led to their disappearance. 52-year-old William Durrell Patterson and his 42-year-old wife Margaret were an ordinary couple. They owned Patterson Photo Supply and were generally well liked by neighbours. William also owned a boat, a Cadillac, stock in a boat company, and property in Mexico. A few nights before their disappearance, the Pattersons invited their friends, the Wards, over for dinner. After they had eaten, Cecil Ward accompanied William to his garage to help him apply acrylic to a boat. The Wards later told the police that neither William nor Margaret mentioned any plans to travel. In fact, Cecil Ward told them that he and William had made plans for later in the week. The last person to see the Pattersons was Jerry Cash, one of their neighbours who took some Girl Scout cookies around to them on the night they disappeared. Cash said Mrs. Patterson seemed very upset and agitated, and Mr. Patterson was clearly unhappy about the visit. The next morning, a man called Doyle Kirkland turned up at the Cecil Ward's automotive business with William Patterson's Cadillac. Ward asked Kirkland what he was doing with William's car, and he told him he had worked on William's boat the previous night, and that the Pattersons were going on a little vacation. He then instructed Ward to fix a few problems on William's Cadillac. Ward was concerned and called the police. When they arrived at the Patterson house, they found it in a mess. There were dishes in the sink and evidence that they had left in a hurry, although curiously they had left the family cat. They later discovered that piles of expensive clothing had been left at the cleaners with no instructions about who was picking it up. Ward cooperated with police, telling them everything he knew about the Pattersons. He also confessed that William had a 20-year-old mistress named Estefana Morfin. Morfin was also interviewed and told authorities that William mentioned having to disappear soon and do it quickly, a statement she later retracted. It also emerged that the couple was secretive about their upbringing and childhoods, although it was known that Margaret's family disapproved of her marriage to William. Margaret's friends also told police that she would not tell them her birth date, exactly how she and William met or how long they had been married. Police thought they had a breakthrough when 9 days after the disappearance, Herbert Roth, the Pattersons' accountant, received a telegram. It was sent from the Western Union office in Dallas, where it had been commissioned via a phone call near the Love Field Airport. The sender was listed as W.H. Patterson, which was odd considering William's middle name was Durrell. The telegram instructed Roth to act as a business manager to the Patterson Photo Supply Company. It also asked him to sell a mobile home owned by the Pattersons and use the proceeds to support the store, and to rent out the Patterson home for at least 9 months. Lastly, the telegram directed Roth to hire a new store manager and replace William. A name was provided. The new store manager would be none other than Doyle Kirkland. Not surprisingly, the telegram cast suspicion over Doyle, but no further evidence could conclusively link him to the disappearance, and by the 1960s, Kirkland quietly left El Paso and police lost track of him. Over the years, several witnesses have claimed to have seen the Pattersons, but the leads led to nothing. On March 27, 1964, the Pattersons were officially declared dead, and the case went cold for over 20 years. Then in 1984, a man named Ronaldo Nangaray came forward with startling new information. Nangaray had been the caretaker of the Patterson home and confessed to homicide detective Freddie Bonilla that he had found blood in the garage and a piece of human scalp on the propeller of Patterson's boat shortly after the couple disappeared. Nangaray admitted to having cleaned up the mess. He also claimed to have seen one of Patterson's associates taking bloody sheets out of the home and throwing them into the trunk of a car, but he could not identify the associate. When asked why he waited so long to come forward, he said he was an undocumented immigrant back in 1957 and that he feared deportation. 2 years after speaking with the police, Nangaray died in a car accident. The whole case is filled with mystery. There are numerous theories, including kidnap, murder, and that the couple were abducted by aliens. There are some, however, who speculate that the Pattersons were spies and had simply fled when instructed to do so, a view El Paso County Sheriff Leo Samiego believed could be credible considering how quickly they vanished. William's father, Luther Patterson, testified in a court of inquiry that he expected William and Margaret would disappear one day because William had the free-spirited heart of a Carney. Luther Patterson went on to say that he was certain the couple was not dead and that William had done things like that before. The case is still open to this day, although it's likely that the Pattersons are long dead. But whatever happened to the residents of El Paso have never forgotten the case and the bizarre events surrounding their disappearance. El Paso High School. El Paso High School was opened in 1916 and enjoys a unique location on the side of a mountain overlooking the city, and is currently the oldest operated high school in El Paso. But along with its respected past and excellent academic results, it comes with a reputation as being a paranormal hotspot. Back in the days of World War I and II, and during the Spanish flu outbreak of 1918, the school was used as an overflow morgue, and the vast basements beneath the building temporarily held bodies that were shipped into El Paso until the next of kin could be informed. That is not the only oddity about the basement. There have been reports that there are early 20th century classrooms down there that are in pristine condition but have been inexplicably blocked off, seemingly for no apparent reason. Over the years, those who have studied or worked at the school have reported a variety of unexplained events, including doors slamming for no apparent reason, odd sounds coming from the gym when there is no one in there, and the feeling of being watched. One of the teachers at the school told of an incident that happened to him one night after he had finished work. He reportedly saw a girl in an old blue dress standing at the end of a hallway, Thinking she was a student who had stayed late, he approached her to tell her to go home. But when she turned to face him, he realized that the sad-looking child was transparent, and as he walked towards her, she faded away in front of him. And he is not the only one to witness the girl ghost. It is a common occurrence, and is thought to be related to a tragedy many years ago, when a girl pupil slit her wrists and plunged from one of the school's balconies to her death. Today the hallway and stairway to the balcony has been sealed off. But more than one person has reported seeing the apparition of a girl standing where the balcony used to be, and those who have tried to access the balcony through the blocked hallway have reported strange slime dripping from the ceiling and a light mist that pours through at least once a day, only to quickly evaporate. Another of the most famous El Paso high school ghost stories comes from a picture taken of the 1985 graduating class. Mixed in among a row of teachers is a young woman in a white dress. After reviewing the photo after it was taken, allegedly no one knew she was there. What do you think about this, Louise? And have you ever heard about this before? Or did you even go to El Paso High School yourself? Let us know. So that's it for this Too Close to Home episode. We hope you've all enjoyed, and again, if you would like your hometown featured, head over to Patreon for more information. We'd just like to say a huge thank you to Shaundra, Sefarina, Bret, Nicole, and Louise, and another big thank you to all the Patreons who are helping support this channel. Thanks for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next video.